Welcome to Book Summary Podcast.
Welcome, learners. Today, we're embarking on a deep dive into something incredibly powerful, yet often overlooked. We're talking about the tiny daily actions that profoundly shape who we are and, what we achieve. Specifically, atomic habits, those extremely small, kind of irreducible units of a larger system that can spark monumental change. Our source material for this deep dive is just packed with insights on how to harness these atomic habits for, remarkable results. Maybe you're prepping for a big project or striving to level up a skill, or maybe you're just curious about how to make lasting improvements in your life. This deep dive is definitely custom tailored for you.
Yeah, and what's so compelling about this material, I think, is how it vividly illustrates that significant progress isn't really about massive one-time transformations. It's more about the astonishing cumulative effect of small, consistent actions. We'll explore the underlying science of how habits work, uncover why they often feel so difficult to change, and then importantly, give you a clear step-by-step framework to make good habits stick and, bad ones simply fade away.
Okay, so how can you truly leverage these insights? We're going to unpack why focusing on these microscopic, consistent improvements can lead to really astounding outcomes. And crucially, how to actually set up your environment, your life, for inevitable success. Let's jump right in with a truly compelling story from the author's own life. Imagine being struck in the face with a baseball bat, suffering multiple skull fractures, ending up in a coma.
Wow.
Yeah. Then, just a year later, getting cut from your high school varsity baseball team, a sport you'd played since you were 4 and dreamed of playing professionally. Talk about hitting rock bottom.
That's a dramatic start, isn't it? And the question that immediately comes to mind is how does someone go from that, such a severe injury and a, humiliating athletic cut, to becoming a top male athlete in college and eventually a recognized expert on habits with millions of readers? Well, the insights we've gathered point directly to a deliberate focus on small habits and a strategy known as the aggregation of marginal gains.
Right, and here's where that idea of marginal gains really comes alive. You look at the saga of British cycling. For almost a century, British riders were, frankly, not great. They'd only managed one Olympic gold medal. The Tour de France was perpetually out of reach. They were so consistently underwhelming that at one point, a major bike manufacturer actually refused to sell them bikes. They feared it would damage their brand.
It's a striking example, isn't it, of the profound impact of tiny improvements. When Dave Brailsford took over as performance director, he implemented this philosophy of seeking out a mere 1% improvement in everything. And we're talking about incredibly subtle adjustments like finding the absolute best pillow for sleep or identifying the perfect massage gel for recovery, tiny things. The cumulative effect of this approach is just mind-boggling. If you manage to get just 1% better each day for a year, you end up 37 times better than where you started. But conversely, a 1% daily decline can lead to a near total collapse. It works both ways.
So if you're looking at your current outcomes, maybe it's your net worth, your weight, or your knowledge base, you need to understand that these are simply lagging indicators of your habits. If you want to predict where you'll truly end up, you just need to trace the curve of those tiny daily gains or losses. This isn't about some, once-in-a-lifetime transformation. It's the direct result of what you do consistently every single day. That all sounds fantastic in theory, right? But if it's so simple, why do so many of us struggle to make lasting change? Well, the material introduces a concept called the plateau of latent potential. Think of an ice cube in a, say, 25-degree room. It slowly warms, 26 degrees, 27, 28. Nothing really seems to be happening. But then at 32 degrees, boom, it melts.
Right. And the crucial takeaway here is that all the effort you put in between 25 and 31 degrees wasn't wasted. It was simply being stored. It was building up potential. People often give up when they don't see immediate results, falling into what's termed a valley of disappointment. We tend to expect progress to be linear, don't we? But the most powerful outcomes are almost always delayed. When you finally break through that plateau, people might call it an overnight success, but really it's the culmination of all that previous, seemingly unproductive work.
Okay, this brings up a critical point, though. If progress isn't linear, how do we stay motivated through those long plateaus? It can feel discouraging. The source suggests a pretty radical shift. Forget about goals and focus on systems instead. We often fixate on specific goals like win a championship or build $1 million business. But the problem is, achieving a goal is often just a momentary change, isn't it?
It is. And if we zoom out, goals can actually restrict happiness. Framing it as, I'll be happy when I reach my goal. And it can trap you in a cycle of just treating symptoms without ever addressing the root cause. For instance, Cleaning a messy room, like the source says, only keeps it clean for a moment if the sloppy habits that cause the mess remain. What truly needs change are the underlying systems that produce those results in the first place.
So adopting a systems-first mentality means kind of falling in love with the process itself, rather than just fixating on the product or the outcome. You can find satisfaction anytime your system is running effectively, not just when you hit some specific milestone. And this ultimately leads us to the most profound level of change, identity change, which we'll get to. Now, the very word atomic is defined here as the single irreducible unit of a larger system. In that spirit, the material breaks down habit formation into 4 simple interconnected steps: cue, craving, response, and reward. This is the fundamental habit loop.
That's a crucial distinction. Understanding that habit loop is absolutely key to both forming good habits and breaking bad ones. You see, habit formation is incredibly useful because our conscious mind is, well, it's a bottleneck. The brain constantly tries to offload repetitive tasks to the non-conscious mind. This reduces cognitive load, frees up mental energy, but here's the rub. It's also what makes bad habits so dangerous. You don't even need to be consciously aware of the cue for a habit to begin,
Right.
which is precisely why awareness is highlighted as the absolutely first step in any kind of behavior change. You have to see it first.
Okay, so let's unpack that first law then. Make it obvious. If habits are often unconscious, how do you even become aware of the ones you don't realize you have? Well, the source recommends some powerful tools like the habits scorecard, literally writing down your daily habits to see what you're actually doing. It can be quite eye-opening.
Yeah.
Or pointing and calling, which is this safety system used by Japanese railway conductors. They actually verbalize their actions out loud, like signal is green, just to increase their awareness. And you can try this yourself. Maybe say aloud your bad habits and their typical consequences. Just vocalizing it can make it more real.
Yeah, bringing it into conscious awareness.
Exactly. And once you're aware, you can then start creating obvious cues for the habits you want to build. The material introduces implementation intentions, which sounds technical, but it's just a precise plan like, I will behavior at time and location. For example, I will meditate for 1 minute at 7 a.m. in my kitchen. Very specific. It also suggests habit stacking. After current habit, I will new habit. Like after I get my morning coffee, I will say one thing I'm grateful for, or after I brush my teeth, I will floss 1 tooth.
And building on that, environment design becomes absolutely crucial. It's not just about internal cues. Think about how stores are optimized. People are 45% more likely to buy items placed at eye level or those on the end of aisle racks, like Coca-Cola. That's not accidental. So you can strategically prime your environment. Place your medication right by the faucet or leave your guitar right in the living room where you'll actually see it. The context itself becomes the cue. There's that example of patients with insomnia being told to only get in bed when tired, to reassociate their bed purely with sleep, not tossing and turning. It's often easier to change habits in a completely new environment, actually, or by dedicating one space, one use for different activities, like only working at your desk.
So, for you, the listener, this means consciously designing your world. The so-called secret to self-control isn't really about some superhuman willpower. It's much more about creating a disciplined environment where the right choice is the easy choice. The famous Vietnam War heroin study illustrated this perfectly, didn't it? Soldiers who were addicted in Vietnam rarely relapsed when they came home because the environmental cues, the triggers, were gone. Compare that to typical rehab scenarios where, sadly, 90% relapse upon returning to the exact same environment. The cues are still there.
That's a great point, and it makes me wonder, well, it explains why simply resisting temptation is such an ineffective long-term strategy. It takes so much energy. Because once a habit is encoded in your brain, the urge, the craving, it still remains, even if it's dormant for a while. So the most practical and effective way to eliminate a bad habit is often to dramatically reduce your exposure to its cue. If your phone distracts you constantly, maybe leave it in another room when you need to focus. If certain social media accounts trigger jealousy or comparison, just unsubscribe, remove the trigger.
Okay, that makes sense. Let's move on to the second law. Make it attractive. Habits are fundamentally, as the source puts it, a dopamine-driven feedback loop. When dopamine levels rise, so does our motivation to act. What's truly intriguing here is that dopamine isn't released only when you experience pleasure. It's also released, often even more powerfully, when you anticipate a reward. That anticipation can sometimes feel even better than actually getting the reward.
And we're often drawn to what are called supernormal stimuli. These are essentially exaggerated versions of features that are naturally attractive to us. Think of how food scientists engineer the bliss point in processed foods, making them hyper-palatable, almost addictive. or how social media delivers far more likes and immediate validation than most real-life interactions ever could. These create heightened versions of reality that significantly amplify our desire, our craving.
But you can harness this. You can use something called temptation bundling to make your desired habits more attractive. There's a story of Ronan Byrne, an engineering student in Ireland, who actually wired his stationary bike to his laptop running Netflix. The show would only play if he cycled at a certain speed, so he effectively bundled something he needed to exercise with something he deeply wanted to do, watch Netflix. Pretty clever.
Very clever. And another incredibly powerful force here is social norms. Humans are, at our core, herd animals, you know. We have this innate desire to fit in, to bond, to earn approval from our tribe. We unconsciously imitate the habits of those closest to us, the majority around us, and those we perceive as powerful or high status. There's even an example of a chimpanzee who would deliberately use a less effective nut-cracking method just to blend in with a new group it joined. So change becomes far more attractive when it means fitting in with your desired tribe or community. Find your people.
Right. Joining a group where your desired behavior is the norm. Okay, let's transition now to the third law. Make it easy. Human behavior at its core tends to follow the law of least effort. We inherently gravitate toward the option that requires the least amount of work or friction. There's a fascinating example about why agriculture spread so much more easily across continents with an east-west axis like Eurasia. It's because similar latitudes meant similar climates, allowing crops and farming techniques to spread without much adaptation, reducing the effort required.
That's a fascinating insight, isn't it? It really highlights how you can profoundly impact your actions by simply optimizing your environment to make good habits easier. It goes beyond just making cues obvious. You actively need to reduce the friction involved in the desired action. So put your gym bag by the door, yes, but maybe even better, choose a gym that's directly on your commute to work. Make it almost effortless to stop by. Japanese manufacturers famously added by subtraction, constantly looking for ways to remove wasted effort from their processes. Even things like dating apps, they drastically reduce the friction of making social introductions compared to, say, approaching someone.
Yeah, I love how this concept simplifies things. Oswald Knuckles, mentioned in the material, apparently had this habit of resetting the room after an activity, putting the remote back, folding blankets not just to be tidy, but to prime the environment, reduce friction for the next desired action. My wife does something similar by pre-sorting greeting cards into categories, which makes sending one feel incredibly easy when the time comes. You could chop healthy veggies on the weekend or lay out your workout clothes the night before. It's all about removing those tiny barriers that stop us.
Exactly. And this raises a really practical question for you listening. How small can you realistically start? The material introduces the brilliant 2-minute rule. When you begin a new habit, it should take less than 2 minutes to actually do, like read one page, not read a book, or do one push-up, not do a full workout, or meditate for 1 minute. Now, this isn't just some trick to get you started, though it does that. It's the ideal way to ritualize the beginning of a larger routine, making that crucial first action almost mindless, automatic.
Right, mastering the art of showing up. And those small choices made at what the author calls decisive moments, like choosing to change into workout clothes instead of collapsing on the couch, or ordering a salad instead of takeout, those moments truly determine the trajectory of your entire day and ultimately your life. It's always better to do less than you hoped than to do absolutely nothing at all. Consistency trumps intensity in the long run. Okay, finally, we arrive at the fourth law. Make it satisfying. This leads us to what's called the cardinal rule of behavior change. And it's simple. What is immediately rewarded is repeated. What is immediately punished is avoided. Our brains are wired that way.
The central challenge here, though, is that our ancient brains evolved in an environment of immediate return. They prioritize immediate rewards over delayed ones. So good habits often have an immediate cost like effort or discomfort and only a delayed reward, such as better health down the line or financial security years later. Bad habits, however, typically deliver immediate pleasure or relief, with the costs only showing up much later. Think smoking or eating junk food.
So how do you hack this inherent wiring? How do you make good habits immediately satisfying? The source tells the compelling story of Stephen Luby working in Karachi, Pakistan. Hand washing was absolutely crucial for public health there, but it was tragically inconsistent among the population. So they partnered with Procter & Gamble and introduced Safeguard soap. Now the soap not only cleaned effectively, but it also foamed up easily and smelled fantastic. Suddenly, hand washing transformed from a mundane chore into something immediately pleasurable, slightly rewarding. And this led to widespread adoption and a significant reduction in illnesses like diarrhea and pneumonia.
It's a brilliant example. And you can directly apply this principle yourself by adding some form of immediate, tangible pleasure to your good habits. For instance, maybe you open a dedicated savings account labeled Trip to Europe or something exciting, and then you transfer, say, $50 into it every single time you successfully skip eating out or ordering takeout. This makes the act of not doing something immediately satisfying because you see that balance grow. The key is to select short-term rewards that actively reinforce your desired identity, not conflict with it.
Right, like rewarding yourself for exercising by eating a tub of ice cream probably isn't reinforcing the right identity. And this concept leads directly into habit tracking, which is inherently motivating for many people because you get that immediate visual proof of your progress. Just marking an X on a calendar after you complete your habit provides instant gratification. It feels good to see the chain grow. It taps into that desire not to break the chain. It's about becoming the type of person who doesn't miss workouts or always writes 500 words. And the simple, powerful rule here is never miss twice. It's okay to miss one day, life happens, but get back on track immediately the next day. The biggest trap is often that all-or-nothing thinking, believing that if you can't do something perfectly, you shouldn't bother doing it at all.
And conversely, to make bad habits unsatisfying, you need to engineer some kind of immediate cost or consequence. There's that provocative, albeit extreme, example from Roger Fisher, the Harvard law professor. He suggested putting nuclear launch codes in a capsule implanted near a volunteer's heart. This would literally require the president to physically kill an innocent person to launch the weapons, adding an immediate, tangible, and horrific pain to the act, making it far less likely.
Okay, yeah, that's intense. But less dramatically, of course, things like accountability partners or habit contracts can be incredibly effective. There's the story of Brian Harris, who signed a formal contract with his wife and his trainer. He promised a $200 fine and having to dress up formally every single workday if he missed logging his food intake. Just knowing someone else is watching or that there's an immediate unpleasant consequence waiting provides a really powerful motivator for most people.
It does. It leverages our desire to maintain a good reputation.
Okay, so those are the 4 laws. But beyond them, how do we push from merely good habits to truly great performance? Well, it starts with a deeper understanding of yourself. The material argues pretty strongly that genes don't determine your destiny. Instead, they illuminate your areas of opportunity. Look at Michael Phelps, the Olympic swimmer, versus Hicham El Guerrouj, the champion middle-distance runner. Both are absolute elites in their fields, yet their natural physical attributes are wildly different. Phelps wouldn't be a great runner, and El Guerrouj wouldn't be a great swimmer.
That's right. And what's truly illuminating here is that competence is highly dependent on context. Your natural abilities matter. Our genes influence everything from our basic personality traits like the big 5 you hear about, openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, neuroticism, to our natural likelihood of things like addiction or certain athletic predispositions. The core insight is to direct your effort toward areas that both genuinely excite you and align with your natural skills. As the saying goes, don't try to teach a fish to climb a tree, play a game where the odds are in your favor.
And if you can't find a game where the odds are already stacked in your favor, the source suggests, well, then you should try to create one. The author James Clear talks about designing his own biomechanics major in college. He cleverly combined physics, chemistry, biology, and anatomy. This essentially reduced his direct competition and made studying feel less like a chore he had to do and more like a personal quest he was genuinely interested in.
Tailoring the game to your strengths. But this then begs the question, how do we maintain motivation when things inevitably get hard or, maybe even more commonly, just plain boring? The Goldilocks rule offers a powerful answer here. It states that humans experience peak motivation when we're working on tasks that are right on the edge of our current abilities. Not so hard that they're discouraging, not so easy that they're monotonous, but just right. Challenging, but achievable. Steve Martin, the comedian, is mentioned as a perfect example. He apparently gradually expanded his stand-up routine by just a minute or 2 each year, carefully balancing familiar, proven jokes with new, slightly more challenging material to keep himself engaged and growing.
That makes sense.
Yep.
But I think perhaps the greatest, most insidious villain to self-improvement, the one we don't talk about enough, is indeed boredom. An elite weightlifting coach shared with the author that the real difference between the very best athletes and everyone else often comes down to simply who can handle the boredom of training every day, doing the same lifts over and over and over again.
That's such a profound insight, isn't it? Professionals don't rely on mood or inspiration. They stick to the schedule, they do the work, even when they don't feel like it. Amateurs, by contrast, let life or fleeting feelings get in the way too easily. Mastery truly requires a certain love of boredom, or at least a tolerance for it, a commitment to the repetition. And even once habits become automatic, we still need a consistent process of reflection and review to avoid plateauing or slipping. This is why teams like the Los Angeles Lakers under coach Phil Jackson apparently reviewed a specific competitive effort basketball score after every single game, or why comedians like Chris Rock are constantly testing out new material in small, low-stakes clubs. You have to keep refining, keep adjusting, even when things are going well.
Right. You can't just set it and forget it entirely. Ultimately, this whole deep dive really shows us that true behavior change isn't just about tweaking actions on the surface. It's about a continuous process of identity change. It's about consciously editing your beliefs about yourself and upgrading who you fundamentally are. So when your identity gets perhaps too wrapped up in a specific, potentially limiting role, like I'm an athlete or I'm a CEO, the material encourages you to maybe redefine it more flexibly. Perhaps as something like, I'm the type of person who is mentally tough and loves a physical challenge, which is broader and more adaptable if circumstances change. So there you have it, a pretty powerful deep dive into the surprising science of habit formation. From the profound impact of tiny 1% improvements to the transformative power of identity change, and from intelligently designing your environment to, yes, even embracing the quiet challenge of boredom. We've covered how tiny actions, when consistently applied, can lead to absolutely massive results in your life.
Yeah, and what truly stands out from this exploration, for me anyway, is how universally applicable these principles seem to be. Whether you're trying to save more money, get physically fitter, learn a new language, or maybe dramatically improve your relationships, the underlying framework remains remarkably consistent. Cue, craving, response, reward.
And for me, the idea that time magnifies the margin between success and failure really resonates. It just hits home. It truly is those small, seemingly insignificant daily choices that, compounded over weeks, months, and years, grow into something far more significant than we often realize at the moment.
Zooming out just a bit further, maybe remember that the seed of every habit is a single, tiny decision. That first step. Your actions aren't just what you do. In a very real sense, they reveal how badly you truly want something, and they shape who you are becoming vote by vote.
So as you navigate your day-to-day, maybe consider this. In a world that's changed so much recently, where our ancient brains are still fundamentally wired for immediate gratification, how can you deliberately, consciously design your own life, your own environment, to make the right choices feel somehow immediately satisfying and the wrong ones feel, perhaps in some small way, immediately unsatisfying? Something to think about.
If you found this episode helpful, please like and subscribe. It really helps me keep bringing you great book summaries every week.